Hello
Hello
everyone,
everyone,
and
welcome back to
welcome
the video.
to a reaction video. We're gonna watch. Apparently, Hera's made a video about why forward town centers in Castle Age are not disrespectful. I'm not disrespectful for sure, but why are they? Hey, that's different. You told me why it's good. This is about not being disrespectful. You guys said it was supposed to be good. Let's see.
Today we're going to be taking a look at forward town centers in Age of Empires 2 and why it's not disrespectful to drop a forward town center in your opponent's base.
Why is he talking so soft?
It can be actually strategic and quite insane to do so in certain cases. Let's hop right in and check it out. Now just a quick disclaimer, this video is not about town center dropping in Dark Age, which is otherwise known as douching. That's a completely separate topic and I'm not going to be covering it at all in this video. Instead, I will be focusing on dropping town centers forward in Castle Age and onwards as a more strategic option and something that can net you advantage.
That town center right there is a bit stupid. As is this town center right here.
Now, a lot of people seem to think that forward town centers are always disrespectful and BM. And while that might sometimes be the case, there are situations where you can net a lot of advantage by having a town center close to your opponent's base with no intention of being disrespectful and BM and just wanting to impose yourself on your opponent when you're in a winning position. The misconception that the town center is strictly an economic or a defensive building meant to make more villagers and grow your economy can sometimes blind us from seeing some of the aggressive potential it really has. And while it most of the time is being used as just an economic building, just something to grow your economy and develop, it actually has a lot of use going forward and making it in your opponent's base or close by in that vicinity. Let's take a look at some of the advantages a forward TC can bring and why we might want to use it in a real game. Now, the main advantage for a forward TC is being able to produce villagers close to your opponent's base. If you want to have villagers forward in a regular game without a forward town center, you have pretty much only one option. You have to send them from your base all the way across the map to your opponent's base. And there's a couple downsides to doing that. A, it takes a long time to get there, and the state of the game from when you want to send the vills over and until when they get there can be completely different, and you might end up just being too late to the party for the forward villagers, and the idea you had in mind just kind of fizzled out as you were walking across the map. There's also a lot of danger of getting cut off by enemy units that are patrolling across the map or even his main army that's coming forward. So by having a forward town center close to your opponent's base, you're easily able to make more vills and have them appear right there forward, saving yourself a lot of time from running across the map, and there's almost no danger of them getting picked off because you have the town center right there to defend them anyways. So not only are you able to reinforce quickly with more villagers, but you're also keeping them very safe close to your opponent's base because a town center is much more protective as a building than, let's say, a tower is, which is the main building people use to make forward and defend their villagers in certain cases.
I have an issue with that in the fact that he's talking about all those things. He's talking about them as if the TC is already there. Like it's the whole point about how do you get a forward TC to begin with, and that is, in my opinion, by pretty much having the game won already. Obviously, you can sneak a forward base, have a forward villager, sneak a TC up somewhere. But like if you make a TC visible in an area where the opponent might actually want to deny it, you probably already have the game sort of in the bag if you get away with it.
Now, a forward town center doesn't only have to be like a strategic kind of drop-off point and a second base that you can launch an attack from. The forward town center can be the attack itself. When you garrison a town center with villagers, it actually does a ton of damage to the opponent's both buildings and units. So making a forward town center to attack your opponent's town centers is not a bad idea at all. And although it might look weird, it's actually very practical in a lot of situations. Think of the game I had versus Tato in King of the Desert 3, where I went forward to the town center and was raiding him with knights. He went for pikeman defense to try to stop my knights, but with the forward town center, I was able to have a building that can easily kill his pikes if he tried to contest me. And so now my knights had a lot more freedom in his base, and he had to abandon a lot of his economy. Now a town center,
if I remember correctly, that game he already had a very clearly winning position at the time when he started with those town centers. I could be wrong, but I think so.
Is much cheaper than a castle and is much stronger than a tower. So think of it as a middle ground between a tower rush and a castle forward. Castle forward is obviously the best, but it costs a lot of stone. Tower might not accomplish a whole lot past feudal age, so the town center might just be your best option as something to send forward and continue to pressure your opponent. Keep in mind that if I use a town center to go forward and deal damage to my opponent, if he doesn't deal with it, that's still a town center that can produce villagers. And even though it's not right next to a gold mine at home or right next to a forest that can be very efficient, I can still make villagers and send them elsewhere and continue to use it as an economic building. It's not just something that's aggressive, so it ends up being a little bit of a hybrid between aggressive and economic in certain cases where your opponent is getting pushed off that area and then you just have that TC sitting there. Well, use it to make villagers. There's no issue whatsoever with that. So you're kind of getting a 2-for-1 value from that one building.
There are some risks with that though. The more villages you make on that forward town center, if he punishes that forward town center, that's the more villages you will possibly lose again, right? So is this one of those joke videos? It doesn't sound like it, no? Doesn't sound like it.
Another advantage for a forward town center is being able to take your opponent's resources. Now granted, this isn't always viable because oftentimes if you're near your opponent's base and you're trying to take their resources, well, they can easily start pushing you and kick you off those resources, and all that investment into that forward town center will simply not pay off. However, in certain cases where it's a very messy game and you have control of your opponent's base and he has control of some parts of yours, going for a forward town center and taking a gold mine or a stone pile away from your opponent can just get you more of those precious resources in games where castle dropping is just very good to secure more ground because it's very awkward and there's not really any clear-cut walls. No one has a set base, and so claiming ground with castles or having excess gold to spam gold units to control the game is very, very important. I wouldn't use this as a primary to spam.
Like this example as shown here, obviously this is just made for this scene, right? It's not an actual game, I believe. How many villages is this? This is 3, 5, 12 villagers. In this game, he was able to send 12 villagers forward to build a town center, which means he already has full map control, and he's obviously not worried. Now, this is a great TC, for example, as he's pointing out. If he gets that TC up, sure, he can mine, or is that 3,200 gold from the opponent, which can be great, right? I don't know, a lot, like Retrofly, pretty much everything he says makes sense. What I'm saying is just that to be able to do a forward town center, to me, I feel like you already kind of are in a winning position. Like, kind of already won, not won the game, but you know what I mean.
Gold units to control the game is very, very important. I wouldn't use this as a primary goal when going forward to the town center. This shouldn't be your main thing that you're trying to accomplish when you want to go for something like this. This is really just a secondary thing. So if you want to go forward and kind of use the town center aggressively to kind of push your opponent off a certain place, well, then you can use some of your military to completely clean them from that area, and then after.
Porofessor is an in-game desktop app. Once the game starts, Porofessor scouts your opponents, learn how well they play their champs, how aggressive they are, and what.
Afterwards, just
Carry
use
on.
the villagers and the town center you have there to grab a gold mine or a stone pile that he has close by and start taking some of his resources. It's really a side quest, not a main mission. Yet another advantage that the forward town center can bring you is being able to constantly have repair villagers for your siege if you're going for a push. This sounds a lot worse than it actually is in practice. In practice, this is quite insane because usually you have 1 or 2 villagers that go forward, build a monastery and a siege workshop, and that's gonna be how you start your push. However, the opponent can easily snipe those 2 villagers, and then you have to wait a long time to reinforce with more villagers from home. However, if you have a town center close by, your opponent does not have the option to simply snipe your repairing villagers, and instead has to fight your siege head on while you're repairing it, which is a lot more of a difficult task to do, especially if you're on a hill and they no longer can trade 1-for-1 against your Mangonel because there's no delete trick. So you can trade Mangonels as soon as they're low, you go back and you just repair them real quick, and if he snipes a villager or 2, no problem, you just bring 1-2 more right there from that forward town center. It's a really annoying thing to have to deal with, and it's something that can really supplement your push when going with multiple Mangonels and siege forward. When thinking of how to follow up a forward town center with, let's say a siege push or whatever else you have going on at that time, something to look for is simply making more production buildings forward. Stables, archery ranges, whatever you're making, you can just make more of them closer to your opponent's base if you're winning on your push, because that just lets you get faster reinforcement time and cut off that defender's advantage that he usually has because your army has to travel the entire map. Well, now with forward production buildings, you're easily able to reinforce and you're kind of both on that same footing when it comes to the quote-unquote defender's advantage. Not only that, but you can actually build up a lot of villagers forward, and then when you get around 10, 15, even 20 villagers, you can easily drop a forward castle right there in your opponent's face with all those villagers, and it's extremely hard to see it coming because you've had those villagers there for a long time. It's not like he saw them coming across the map and had a lot of time to prepare. You just randomly had them there, close to his base, and then dropped it right there wherever you want, really on a hill, close to your opponent's base, next to his town center, or next to his expansion as he's kind of expanding away from you. And you can use that as a great follow-up to your already existent push. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of reasons you'd want to go for a forward town center. But now you might be thinking, when should I actually look to do this? Is there a certain type of game that is more prone to having a forward town center being more viable? Well,
when you already won.
Well, the truth is, I personally have a theory in that we don't see this being used as often as it should be. I think this is a really strong thing to go for, and a lot of players are just not going for it because it's not very known. Maybe in the next couple of years, a meta will shift towards forward town centers being a very popular thing. We'll have to wait and see. But right now, the best time to be able to use this kind of tactic is when the games are extremely messy. Think of like when there's a tower rush in the early game, or when both players take a lot of damage, so no one has this kind of like clean build order, clean transition from one age to the next. Because in these kind of games, you tend to spend a lot of time in Castle Age, and you tend to not have the option to just randomly go up to Imperial Age quickly. And so in those situations, a forward town center plus a big push and just trying to grab space and resources wherever you can ends up being a much more important thing to do than just simply trying to build up casually and just massing the same old armies that we always have, like crossbows and knights, because, well, the game is a lot more messy and there's a lot more chaos going around. I could also see this being a good tool to use when your opponent is not really posing much of a threat.
Stop showing this game.
You want to commit a lot of your resources into something forward, and so you start to push with siege and end up wanting to follow up that push because it's going well, and so you just have those villagers, those 2 or 3 villas that you sent forward to make the siege shop, already there near your opponent's base. You can just drop a town center to use it as something that could follow up your siege push. And like I said, it starts off with a siege push with 2 villagers, then the town center comes down, you have more villas to repair the siege, and then you have more villas to make more production buildings. You can take your opponent's resources, and then you can finish the game with a forward castle. All of the points I mentioned can just mesh together very nicely to make for a very chaotic yet calculated aggressive game. Thanks for watching this video, guys. It's a very interesting topic, and I'd love to hear any other advantages that you guys can think of that the forward town center can bring. I just don't want these kind of moves that players think of that are very creative to be dumbed down to something that's just disrespectful or BM by a lot of the people in chat or some of the casters that we have in the community. This isn't a slight against anyone. I don't care to kind of make anybody look bad in particular. I'm just kind of making this video because I found it interesting, and I kind of want to rewrite the narrative over some of these creative tools that the players have at their disposal, because I think that's what makes the game fun, and that's what keeps the game diverse, seeing these things in high level and even tournament games. Thanks for watching the video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
I have to sign in to like, okay. So this was on Hera, Age of Empires 2 channel, obviously. Okay. Everything he says pretty much makes sense, right? There's nothing he said here where I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense, right? Everything makes sense. I also agree that it doesn't have to be disrespectful, which is the topic of the video. So I say he's correct, 100%. What I would comment on though is that there's so much it depends and what ifs in this video, right? Yeah, like if you have a 4 TC, first of all, how many villas do you already send forward to begin with? So he said like you build up your numbers and suddenly you have 15 villagers. That means you built a TC with what, 2 or 3 villagers, all that stuff, right? So there's so many what ifs and this and that. But yeah, obviously getting a TC up on the forward goal, like on the gold of the opponent, means you can mine probably half of it at least before, if you're going to lose the TC or the forward position, probably you mine roughly half the resources of that. Now it's, to me, it's a high risk, high reward approach. Again, like if you already have a forward position in feudal age, you may tower rush, whatever, forward, skirm, spearman, whatever, and you still have leftover vills and there's a natural place to put a TC. Sure, why not? It doesn't hurt anyone. But when you commit so much onto that one forward town center could also mean one less defensive town center, which means that potentially you get raided to death at home because you only have 2 TCs at home instead of 3 to cover your base, right? So again, I think everything he says here is pretty much correct, but I think it's definitely not disrespectful, doesn't have to be, but there's a lot of risks involved in actually putting the forward town center. But again, I don't agree with your argument that you have to be in a winning spot. No, I agree as well. Like I said, in case you are like in a forward and there's a messy game, But what I'm thinking of, let's say you play a regular feudal age, you're at your base, he has his base, you both went scouts, right? You both went scouts into archers and you just traded off units. If one of them then decides, yeah, I'm going to go forward town center as my transitioning castle age, you both hit castle at the same time. Obviously, then it's just a troll and dumb strategy, kind of, right? But yeah, it's not disrespectful. There's a lot of good benefits if you get the 4 town center, potentially, but there's also potentially negatives, and you might get punished for doing so as well. But yeah, I would say it was a very nice video that Hera made. There's a timeline as well if you want to see it.